Welcome to something different for once. I do play other games outside of the To the Glory Pike and Shot series. I figure people generally like watching people play games who are good at those games, and I am not good at nearly as many games as I play. But I've been having conversations with some people recently about, you know, the early Total War games versus later ones, and I really do think the early games have a lot to recommend them, and in some ways outperform the later games. In some ways, they definitely don't. Obviously, graphics and UI have come a long way since 1999. And although this is a mod for Medieval 1, and Medieval 1 came out in, I think, 2002? 2001, around there? It's the same engine as Shogun 1, which I was playing back in 1999. So same engine, same level of graphics, really. So this is the Pike and Musket mod. There's a bunch of great mods for Medieval 1. I have a Biblical Era one, a Hellenistic Successors one. This Pike and Musket mod has three different time periods. There's like late 15th, late 16th, and late 17th century of the campaigns. So, okay, so UI has come a long way. Left click to select a unit and left click to move a unit also is it's not great. You get used to it, but it's not great. And graphics wise, it's sprites. They're fine. I think it's got a certain classic game charm to it. I understand if you were, born after the turn of the millennium and all that shit. This might be a bit jarring. To me, everything after Half-Life 2 looks amazing. So, you know, in terms of scale, it's not dissimilar. The max scale was 16 units. I know modern Total War can go a little bigger than that, but in terms of number of men, it's not too different. And really, I don't think one person can control more than 16 units effectively in a real-time game without pausing constantly, and I don't like pausing constantly. Uh, but not even talking about the campaign map, but even just looking at the battle map, there's a lot to recommend these earlier games. For one thing, the combat model, it's a lot more wargamey, old school, so it's slower paced. Morale is much more brittle and sensitive, so there's a lot more work on both maintaining your own army's morale and breaking the enemy's morale. Uh, on top of that, mechanically, there's things that actually work in early, the first games that either didn't work again later or were deliberately done away with. So guns are a great example. Guns were horrible in Medieval 2. They were a pain in the ass to get them to work right. And in Warhammer, they're called guns, but they might as well be bows. They don't care about line of sight and all that stuff. Here, guns are direct line of sight weapons, and there's, ranked, like 3 rank rotation that works very well. And it's odd that they could do it in the first games and then fail. This battle, by the way, is part of a campaign in Pike and Musket. I'm playing as Russia. My frontier garrison was attacked by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. I have an army based. It's pretty mixed. I have Tatar mercenaries, traditional Russian cavalry in mail with bow and glaive. We have Western-style dragoons with musket and bardiche, Cossacks with muskets, Streltsy with arquebus and bardiche, and also Cossacks with gun and sword, and some Western mercenaries manning artillery. The Poles also have a mixed host. They've got horse archers of various kinds. They've also got armored lancers. There's waves of reinforcements approaching, and they've got musketeers as well. So, yeah, you can see that 3-rank rotation. Well, it was an ugly start, what can I say? But again, this is a pretty manageable pace. One thing I liked about the earlier games, it was quite difficult to pull units out of melee. You could do it, but it was really tough on morale. If you tried to do it with shitty units, it would just break and run. So we had to throw in our cavalry to stabilize the situation. Our Cossacks are running away. Pikemen are moving forward as well. Now, at some point, it doesn't tell you in the replays, but they do manage to slay the enemy general. That means that their morale for their whole army is going to remain pretty brittle. These dragoons are in the forest. That gives them a bonus against cavalry. Still a bit of a tough fight, but I think they managed to see off these tatters. Oh yeah, so that was when the general died and they book it, right? So in modern Total War, like even with the general death, you know, a good quality unit of cavalry charging some missile troops, I don't think they would have broken there. Right, so morale is quite brittle. It's heavily affected by things like getting hit on the flanks, so, you know, I had to throw this cavalry in, and even so they're wavering, losing badly, so I have to throw in more men. Total mess. So yeah, they're off, running away. So there's a lot less of the sort of like bloody fights to the death. It's certainly not realistic. Casualties are still really high when, you know, in reality armies would disintegrate with far fewer losses, but it's not as extreme as in more modern games. Yeah, you know, and of course engine limitation, like this is a Pike and Musket era mod. You wouldn't have pikemen separate from musketeers like this. They would be in integrated units, but what can you do? I would love if historical Total War explored this time period someday, but you know, if they were to do so, they would have to make sure to have composite units with fixed depths, and I don't really see them going for that. You know, your men are pretty good about not firing into melees unless you directly order them to. And here I've directly ordered my dragoons to fire into this melee to try to see off this light cavalry. And again, that rotation. If you align them in two ranks, they won't rotate, they'll just blast away all at once, which is a lot more damaging, but then the reload is quite vulnerable. So, at this point, we've more or less seen off the first assault, and things aren't looking great. You know, half the army is dead or fled, and there are plenty more enemies. The upside is that, you know, archery isn't that effective, especially at long range. So we're taking casualties from bow fire, but it's not horrific. You have that odd situation in like Shogun 2 where archery outranges bows because balance reasons, I assume. It's not really like that here. So these Rindi, our general's bodyguards, I believe they spread fear among the enemy. So, you know, we try to bounce them off, time it so that they get hit by a volley of gunfire, and then get charged by these, you know, intimidating dudes. And we try to just keep them off us. But eventually the Polish infantry is going to arrive. So they haven't done anything yet, but, you know, mercenary musketeers, that's problematic. I also really kind of like the organic feeling of how units in melee act here. Yeah, I mean, after Rome 1, it became a lot more like they rout and then they instantly all die if you're in contact, more or less, and it takes time here. Actually, I must have a cannon too. So, we can speed up a bit while we wait. They're getting reinforcements in from off map. So they come from back there. So in the meantime, I just form up, spew bullets at anyone that gets too close, and hope for the best. I suppose another old game thing, the horse archers can't move and shoot at the same time. That's right. This was impressive at the time. There was physics for the artillery, right? So the cannonballs would actually bounce across the battlefield and take guys out. There weren't. I mean, like what other strategy game had physics-based effects like that? Myth and Myth 2, they had the dwarf bombs and flying bone fragments and stuff. But yeah, that sort of thing generally wasn't done too much with strategy games at the time, so pretty impressive. Now, what's interesting is that like this battle has already been like what, 3 or 4 times the length of your standard Rome 1 battle. And it's not over, because now the Poles have brought up infantry support. And this is the big problem. Again, trying to bounce a charge with our heavies. The Tatter model, by the way, is just straight jacked from the Shogun 1 Mongol Invasion expansion. So, well done there. I don't know if you could get away with that kind of thing, but modding was a lot more freewheeling back in the day, I guess. And my cannon crew ran out of ammo, so I had them Leroy Jenkins forward. Probably not a great idea, but you know, the battle was not looking good. So at this point, I noticed that there is yet another wave of Polish cavalry on the way. The Ratarzi, so these are the Polish word for reiters, so these are either German mercenaries or Polish cavalrymen fighting in the German style, so, you know, armored with pistols. So at this point, seeing the mass of reinforcements arriving, I start to pull back, so I notice that there is a slight rise here. It's very slight, but it's a little downhill, and you know what, I'll take what I can get. So we'll speed things up a bit. We do take some arrow fire on our march back. So, fresh enemies on the way, still including infantry. But, on the other hand, their general is dead, so they are brittle. There's also physics modeling for bullets, and that, like, if they miss a guy in front, they can hit one behind. The rain is bad for everyone. It's bad for gunpowder weapons, it's bad for bows too. At that point, they lose heart and flee the field. And I'm pretty much happy to let them go. So yeah, Medieval 1. It's still pretty fun to play. Still got a bunch of mods available. If you can get over old school graphics and a somewhat clunky UI, I think it's still worth playing.